Hey everyone, welcome. I'm super excited to be doing a stream on Walter Russell and the Universal One. I'm very grateful because Andy Bittner ended up introducing me to Walter Russell, and I have loved going through this book and his work, and I'm excited to share it with you. And I actually have a great setup where I'm going to be able to show you on an over-the-shoulder shot much of the key points as we go through it. So let's jump right in. So I'd like to start things off by indicating how Walter Russell is adamant about how mind equals light, which equals matter and energy. And similarly, one God, the Universal One, how great geniuses of the ages have been men of supervision, and how they are usually only worshipped when they're dead. And man can produce nature's elements in exactly the way nature itself produces them. This book was published in 1927. As soon as man stops its jungle habits and settles his human relations by more peaceful methods, we can advance. We need a consistent cosmogony. Walter Russell spent a full 7 years in writing this book, and its mix of science and metaphysics. We need intuition. We need to go beyond rationality, be supra-rational, have faith in the infinite. We need to be knowing man instead of sensing man. Increase awareness of our relation to source. Just going to zoom out a bit. Hopefully that's still okay for people to read. I'm figuring out how to optimally do these read-alongs about the key points. Again, these are the most salient things that I've taken out of my exegesis. And so you as well will have your own drawing out of the most salient points, and I put the links in the bio below to the University of Science and Philosophy, as well as their books, where you can check out the other writings of Walter Russell. We have to go deeper and deeper into the invisible and unseen, the why of things. The senses cannot fathom, but the consciousness can. Beyond that range lies the cause of it, the why of it, prana, awakening within man an awareness of the source, orderliness, symmetry, and balance which all nature expresses. Nature perpetually polarizes and depolarizes in its every expression. Breathings, but you are not aware of it. Again, that's the prana. That is life. The fulcrum from which all power springs is knowledge. When man has that omniscience unfolding in cosmic man, he will no longer misuse, break, or disobey God's law. He will command it. He will know the law. You have opened the door into the infinite. Now science must enter. Physicist type of mind could never fathom the mystery of the universe, the great story, the great inspiration of some poet, painter, philosopher, or saint will be the one to explain it. As long as man neglects to honor his geniuses who are engaged in the arts of peace and glorifies his heroes who are most proficient in the arts of war, the human race will continue to suffer the agonies of its own making. God-loving men, the law of love is rhythmic, balanced interchange between all things. Boom. I love those 3 words. And Andy had definitely prioritized my awareness of them as well. Rhythmic, balanced interchange. All things are light. Light separates not, nor has it bounds, nor is it here and not there. New age of knowledge and awareness of our oneness with all life. All right. Mathematical and measurable proof of the existence of but one mind, one force, one substance. Power to create as God creates. Man is God. Man is mind. Man is matter. Mind and matter are one. God is mind. Universe is a multiplicity of changing effects. One unchanging cause. One universe, one mind, one force, one substance. Knowledge is not acquired from without, but merely recollected from within. Boom. Electromagnetic process of thinking mind. Think in light, electromagnetic periodicities. Think in light from within. Open the doors of all knowledge. Omnipotence lies in perfect thinking. Matter is light. Nothing is which is not light. All things are answerable in light. The universe is a tonal one, a dimensionless universe of light. High octaves of the inner mind. Spirit. Ecstatic man is inspired man of universal genius, of inner thinking. Work which is created in ecstasy of inner thinking can alone endure. Dimension disappears in light, then he is Superman, then he is universal genius. Light is the universal language in which the divine concept is plainly written. Truth as plainly told in light. The universal language of light. And here are some of the epic visuals that we'll also be unpacking as we go. Periodicity is an absolute characteristic of all phenomena of nature. It's the Russell periodic chart of atomic weights, electromagnetic charge, gravitation, radiation, sex, temperature, electric magnetic pressures, valence, ionization, and other periodicities. The universe is not a separate creation of God's. It is God. A perfect and omnipotent God could not create imperfection. This is a creating universe. Periodic change of state of the one unchanging substance. It is evolution. God is thinking mind. Substance or body of God is light. One universal substance, which is God. Thinking substance. Mind is expressed in light. The one substance is the etheric, spiritual substance of the one universal mind. God and matter are one. Spirit and matter are the same substance. That substance is light. One life in the universe. One living, breathing, pulsing being. The universe and all that is one. Again, that very deep drive towards the universal one, the law of one, and how it is a rhythmic, balanced interchange. Life is the pulsing electromagnetic oscillation of thinking mind. All life is immortal life. No matter is lifeless. Life has no beginning, life has no ending, life is eternal. Life is in and of all inorganic as well as all organic matter. Life is the effect produced on the substance of mind by the sequence of alternating electromagnetic pulsations which constitute the process of thinking. All growing things are imbued with the life principle. All things are growing things. All matter is evolving. All matter is growing. All matter is living. All motion is motion in equilibrium. No other motion is possible. Boom. Motion in inertia. Motion in opposition. Matter is motion in opposition. Matter equals motion in opposition. Motion in inertia is equally electric and magnetic. There is no death. Life is eternal. Oscillatory motion is a pulsating in-breathing and out-breathing. Father, mother forces of mind, one force. All matter is but a variation of the state of light. Human mind equals scale invariant microcosm of sunlight at the macrocosm. As above, so below, with light. Matter and mind and light and energy are eternal. They are constant. They are cause. Form and motion are illusions. They are fleeting. They are effects. Very similar to the perennial spiritual wisdom that's been taught for thousands of years of the absolute is the formless, is the agentless, is the attributeless ocean. Meanwhile, the downstream forms of the waves on the ocean are the physicalism that we find ourselves in. And that we are infinitely exploring the creativity and the expression of the absolute ocean expressing itself as those waves. Mind is the universe. It is all that is, ever was, or ever will be. The substance of mind is the foundation of creation. It is the seed of the universe. Seed of the universe is the whole of the universe, all intelligent, all powerful, and all present. Without motion and opposition, neither heat, color, cold, sex, mass, or any of the effects of thinking could be or appear to be. All these elements are made up of light units in maximum motion and opposition. And we talked about this when David Johnson, DJ, was on the show, who's another close friend of Andy, who's working on simulation design with his company Argos Vu, and the actual Vu technology itself that enables us to do things like simulate the light units as these fundamental units, and then be able to, he's working with people like Terrence Howard on these theories of everything around what Walter Russell hypothesizes as light units. And then I have another view for these big graphics that will help. All right. So there is but one cosmic substance, one mind, and then the split here, evolution is the concentrative desire of mind, dissolution is the decentrative desire of mind. And this is out of the one. And this is back into its source in the one. And so the universal substance divides itself into the appearance of two opposites. And again, this is my exegesis of it. Many states of motion are possible, but there are not two substances in the universe. And there's a lot more to unpack in these graphics, and I'll do my best to explain as I go of what I drew out of it, And then you yourself are going to have to undergo a process if you're interested in diving deeper into Walter Russell's work, The Universal One. And again, the links in the bio below. Go and support them and buy yourself a book and draw out your own most salient points from what he's saying here. But this is extremely aligned with the perennial spiritual wisdoms and extremely aligned with the metaphysics of those perennial spiritual traditions, as well as what science even is currently pointing towards today. Creation is merely a swing of the cosmic pendulum from inertia through energy and back again to inertia forever and ever, a series of opposing pulsations. And the reason why I'm going through the book this way is because it's really difficult even to draw out what has most profoundly affected me and then to explain that to you without you seeing what Walter had written along the way. And so it's almost better for me to go through the book this way of showing you exactly what he wrote and how I drew out the salience from it, and then for you to simultaneously be able to draw out the salience from this as well. It almost gives you a wider range of options on the buffet, and I thought that was going to be better than doing just my main key takeaways from it, because you'll also see my main key takeaways throughout the book as well. One universal mind is a formless thinking substance. Thinking is an action, which is the cause of all motion. Thinking leaves the evidence of that process behind it, registering the effect of its passage through the ocean of the universal mind. Again, and here's the law. On one side, the positive electricity. On the other side, the negative electricity. The positive seeks higher pressures. The negative seeks lower pressures. And so there's a magnetic flow, an inhalation and an exhalation. This is the cosmic pendulum. And I wrote here, the secret of universe is in your breath, prana. Again, that's a very perennial spiritual wisdom, is that it's as simple as that polarity of inhalation and exhalation, or of electromagnetism, or of Genero-Radiation, that style of thinking, centrifugal and centripetal force. There's all of these male, female, day, night sort of dualities that are transcended by the universal one, but that is the way that it expresses itself, through that pendulum swing between the two and a flux of the ratios as they express themselves as the waves on the ocean. The passage of big boats and little boats and all the winds upon the tranquil ocean of waters. There you go. Again, the same spiritual perennial metaphor that's used. Disappear back into the substance of which they are a part. The difference in time is but relative. Time is nothing in eternity. Giant suns have radiated their heat to the absolute zero. They seize all appearance of individual existence. Substance is as eternal as mind is eternal. And again, here's another way to view it: the creation and the decreation. So in this case, it'd be something like that. On the creation, it's the concentrative, contractive pressures of the centripetal force of thinking. This is a lot like Earth, or like company centralization. And then on the other side, you have decreation, which is a lot like the decentrative, expansive pressure of the centrifugal force. And the centrifuge is what separates substances of different densities. This is like the metaverse. This is like decentralization. And here's one of the famous illustrations of Walter Russell. And I wrote here, subatomic, atomic, chemistry, biology, all in one energy field, ocean. Electromagnetic flux ascending to attractor, of metaverse recursion. One complete cycle of the transfer of the universal constant of energy into and through all of its dimensions in sequence. That man can comprehend, all that man can comprehend of this universe can be spelled out in their beginnings on these two opposing spiral waves within one sphere. The force called thinking, which impels mind into concentration and decentration in sequence, is the only energy of the universe. The universe is mind only. Time begins with the action of thinking. Life is eternal. Again, this is very much deeply idealism, but it's also the synthesis of idealism with its physical immersion into the reality. Because it's not two, it's one. The consciousness is not two, it's not observer and physical. They're one. And that's the point. It's the same thing that's been trying to be communicated for the longest periods of time now. Life is merely the action of thinking. The tempo of the cosmic rhythmic meter of thinking is absolute. All motion is action and reaction. Opposites known as generation and radiation. I love that. The generation and radiation. This part's great. Generation is the attractive, gravitative, positive electric force, and radiation is the repulsive, emanative, negative magnetic force. All motion is in equilibrium. Thinking is the electro-generative action and magneto-radiative reaction of mind. Boom. Thinking is a simple process of very complex effects. The electromagnetic opposition of mind as expressed in the process of thinking is the source of all of the energy of the universe. The inertial line or plane, dead center between force and force, where no force exists. Oh, I'm so pumped to explain this. The universe breathes, inhaling and exhaling as man breathes. Exhalation and inhalation in sequence is a characteristic of all phenomena of matter. The former is centripetal and its direction is toward the nucleal center of a closing spiral. The latter is centrifugal, away from the center toward the opening spiral. Their difference is but a rising or lowering of potential. Genero-activity builds the elements, radioactivity tears them apart. Apparently separate particles in motion, light units. Spiral genero-radiative waves are the medium of reproduction of idea throughout the entirety of the universe. All idea of mind produced by thinking is measurable waves of electromagnetic opposition. Again, there's the highlight for me, a critical one, genero-radiative. Waves, interchange, rhythm, balance. All right. Everything is electromagnetic, genero-radiative interchange of God's mind, of which we are nerve endings. All motion is spiral and direction is curved. So in this case, it's like, let's start here. So the law, to every action there is an equal and opposite reaction, aka Newton's third law of classical mechanics. And then let's go down here next. All mass is accumulated centripetally by the genero-active, gravitative attractive power of electricity and is dissipated centrifugally by the radioactive repelling power of magnetism. The greater the mass, the greater the potential. A lot of this is also similar to gaining spiritual mass and over time becoming more and more of a beacon of that God consciousness. So here's a good way to visualize it, right? So you can think about it, this is a way that I'm understanding it, where each oxygen/nitrogen molecule in the sky has this between them, this inertial plane of equal pressures which lies between any two masses. And that can also be thought of similarly as when you finish your that stopping point at the inhalation and then stopping point. And so this can also be thought of similarly like when we had Frank Chester on the show and he talked about his chestahedron, which is like where we have our heart, the lub-dub, that constant systolic, diastolic, where you have a high amount of pressure as the heart sends the fresh oxygenated blood throughout the body, and then as it diastolic dubs, and then it has that lower pressure where it's taking in both what has already distributed oxygen, so the deoxygenated blood, to then pump that out to the lung capillaries for there to be the alveoli, for there to be the exchange again with the environment. And so that's very similar with the O2, and the CO2 is very similar to the blood glucose homeostasis that happens throughout the body, where you have the pancreas secreting both insulin and glucagon, and also the eye accommodation that happens. And this is very similar. It's like if you put the heart and the lungs on each end of this infinity, you literally have infinity within you, and it's clear as day. It's right under our nose. And this is a really interesting, fascinating way to sort of look at the forces that are at play. And there's very few people that are able to explain it at this depth, and that's one of my favorite parts about Walter. Very polymathic. All the elements of matter are but orderly and periodic variations of the one substance, light. Innumerable states of so-called speeds of light. And here's another visualization where you have, on one side, you have this centrifugal force of repellative, and on the other side, you have the centripetal force of gravitative. And so it's very much like this action and reaction. You have these balances of the accelerative, decelerative, and the equalization. You have the energy and the inertia. You have the instability and the stability. There are no opposites. The totals of any two opposing forces added together make one. Boom. And that's another sort of really good way to think about it as well, is that those two poles, they make one, but it's definitely expressed as those two poles. Relativity is the science of an illusion in 4 dimensions as perspective is in 3. God is light. The inner mind of ecstatic man knows the real light and that he is one with light. He is not deceived by its illusion. Appearances have become as facts, and the one reality has become mere conjecture. Man must learn to alter his concept of the reality of solidity to the reality of mind as the source of the illusion of that solidity. The one substance of mind is the one reality. form in matter as but the registration of his thinking. Mind is omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent. He is mind. A conditioned fact cannot be a fact. It merely appears to be a fact. The universe of man is but a kaleidoscope turning, ever turning, and complexing with its turning. The universe of form is a universe of integration, disintegration, and reintegration. This chapter's on the sex principle. It's so interesting. Your time to have a kid might only be when their soul is ready, kind of like the spark in Pixar's recent film Soul. Sex is the apparent division of the father-mother substance of mind into apparent opposites. Sex is the active desire of mind for division into opposites and its reactive desire for unity. Sex is that motive force which demands separability into two and equally desires union of the apparent two into one. Fascinating. Nothing can be without the desire to be. Desire dominates all thinking. Desire dominates all matter. All desire is sex desire. Wow. The continuance of existence. And a lot of the world's most famous, renowned biologists have been articulating this very similarly from the lens of physicalism, that much of what, even from a psychological level as well, much of what is our tendencies is around the thinking mind to procure the most optimal mate in the two coming to one, that union that then portals in another whirlpool of consciousness in the ocean. Sex force is the builder of the apparently many things out of the totality of the reality of the one thing. The one expresses itself as two coming together to portal in more desire to know/express itself. The material substance of mind cannot evade its materialization into the form desired by mind. Sex and life and light and intelligence are in and of all things from the beginning. All form appears through sex, passes through a progressive change called growth, and disappears. All growth is impelled by force and motion and controlled by sex. There can be no motion without the force of thinking. Without union in mating, the idea of any one thing would be extinct as an appearance. Sex, force, and motion. The whole idea of all things is in the seed of all things. In the seed of idea is the whole of idea. In the seed of the oak is the whole of the oak. And this is what we talk about with recursion and the logistic map. People come together to portal a new consciousness, then grow apart. And what we mean by this is that the cyclic cosmology is never evolving to be a determinism of the actual creative process. The attractor is cyclical and deterministic, but the actual creative Bayesian cloud of possibilities is completely based on the exploration of God through us. All idea is registered in the little particles heretofore referred to as light units. These units of light, heat, sex, electricity, and magnetism are all male and all female. Every unit is either preponderantly male or preponderantly female. Just so is every unit either preponderantly electric or preponderantly magnetic. Negative, positive, generative, radiative. Each unit is all of these. Each unit is variable. And the variability is orderly and governed by measurable laws of periodicity, which are also the laws by which motion is governed. All that man calls creation is the result of motion, which is due to the opposing impulses of thinking. Opposing desire in sex expression is the cause of opposing motion. Opposing electromagnetic impulses are sex expression in creative thinking. Form is born true to the rhythm of thinking. All thinking is rhythmic thinking. All thinking is sex thinking. Creation is the transforming of the one substance by the rhythmic thinking of idea into apparent opposites and into that which man calls form. Beyond this, there is no more. Creation is but a concept of mind. It is but an illusion, an effect of thinking. All thinking is registered in light. All light is sex expression. Light is the language of all thinking. Light is the energy of all thinking. All energy is the energy of sex expression. There is no other energy. Through evolving sex, light causes the transition of the universal substance into form. Through sex periodicity, light transforms form into variety of form. The universe of motion is a universe of production, destruction, and reproduction. Woo! Sex opposites of light. Light is the power which God has used to create the appearance of form. Inexhaustible source of energy which continues matter in motion. Fullness of energy available to his command. The rhythm of creative thinking is absolute. All thinking is creative thinking. All thinking is creating that which it is thinking. God's power of expressing himself is in transforming that which is his own body into an effect which man calls creation. Man's body is but an individual effect of the whole of man and is the product of his thinking. The universe is the total of all individual effects and is the product of God's thinking. God's thinking is man's thinking. All mind is divine mind. Light is God's medium of expressing himself. It is the only medium at his command. Light is man's medium of expressing himself. It is the only medium at his command. Creation of that which man calls form has a perpetual beginning and a perpetual ending. Its beginning is in thinking. Its end is in thinking. Its beginning is its ending. It has no beginning, it has no ending, no stop, no break, continuity of thinking, octaves of perception, ending, disappearance beyond his range of perception. Form is born of the desire to express idea. Form is the plaything of idea. All form is form of sex. Idea is never satisfied with form. Form of idea is continuously changing with the process of thinking. Form is born anew with each impulse of thinking. Idea is reasserted in new form with each impulse of thinking. Generative or male sex thinking, radiative or female sex thinking, regenerative union of sex thinking, equilibrium of sex. Idea of mind may mature or evolve only through sex union. Man thinks idea. Thinking is the force of motion. All motion is expressed in waves. All waves of motion are both female and male. All motion is oscillatory action and reaction. Action is male, reaction is female. All idea is registered in light as an appearance of the form of idea. Form of substance is electromagnetic. This means that it is preponderantly male and preponderantly female in periodicity. All idea evolves from idea into form of idea, which in turn devolves back again into idea. To evolve idea, he must think in light. A union of these two opposites is the reproductive force. This is a universe of reproduction. An action and its opposite reaction are not two. Their energies, when combined, make one. All idea and all forms of idea are the result of union between equal or unequal opposite actions and reactions of force. In perfection of union lies stability. In imperfection of union lies instability. Unstable unions tend to return to their separate tonal states. If either mate in an unstable union finds a more equal mate, it will always leave the former and go to the latter. Every chemist knows to a certainty that he can break up any unstable compound formed by the union of unequal opposites by merely introducing an element which is more nearly a true tonal mate to either of the united elements. Chemically, every element is both alkaline and acid, but it is preponderantly one or the other. All motion is expressed in waves. Light does not travel, it reproduces itself. It is the exact reproduced chemical counterpart of the star integrated as light within the observer. No idea of mind is seen at a distance. The state of motion which represents the idea is reproduced as light by regenerative impact within the observer. No idea of mind has place or position in time or space. All idea is universal. All that is of everything else that is. All potential is constantly changing and interchanging. All mass is degenerated by its own radiation. All mass is generated by accumulation of the universal constant of energy into higher potential. That which is generated must be radiated. No idea of mind once begun ever ends. No idea of mind ever began or ever ended. And here's that visualization of the induction and the conduction. That positive and the negative. Mind is all there is. Any continuous line in space would curve ultimately back to its point of beginning. Therefore, the universe must be either spherical or quasi-spherical. Man's fixed concept of the reality of time is a drag anchor holding him away from truth. In my opinion, that's one of the most profound aspects to what Walter says here. Both ego and time are the two biggest anchors holding humans away from truth. As soon as you trash the concept of time, you become eternal. And then you realize that your awareness is that. We'll be making more content about that shortly. There are no parts to mind substance, no place and no position. Every part is the same part. Every place and position is the same place and position. Thinking is universal, and all effects of thinking are universal. Sequence is an appearance due to form. Adjust his thinking to a subjective universe in which the unrealities disappear into the reality of light. Einstein's error is in attaching to the substance of mind the attributes which belong solely to dimension of the substance in its appearance as form. A dimensionless universe. Dimension is but an appearance, an effective motion, and is non-existent. Man must think in light for true comprehension of mind. Man may shift his thinking from the low speed of his outer mind to the higher speeds of his inner mind at will. Matter and mind and light and energy are the same. They are one. They are constant. They are eternal. The universe of mind is a dimensionless universe. The creating universe is the idea of mind. It is the divine concept of a universe of motion and the apparent separability of the one thing into the appearance of many individual things. Form appears as a result of motion generated by the concentrative impulse of thinking. All motion is controllable by mind. All states of motion are orderly and periodic. All creation is reducible to about 140 elements, which tell the entire complex story of God's thinking, just as all literature is reducible to 26 letters, which tell the entire complex story of all of man's thinking. It's an awesome analogy. The elements of matter are all of the same substance in varying states of motion. Man's labors in the bowels of the earth for metals which he can create for himself with ease when he fully comprehends the motion which has assembled the forms of those elements out of the idea of the divine concept. Become alchemical gods. There is no substance which nature can produce that man cannot also produce. And here's a breakdown of the dimensions here: length, breadth, thickness, duration, time, sex, pressures, potentials, temperature, ionization, crystallization, valence, axial rotation, orbital revolution, mass, color, plane, tone, and ecliptic. Common to all of them is an orderly periodicity. Elements assorted into about 7,000 color lines of light. These 7,000 lines of light are the letters of the universal language of light, the language in which God speaks to man. He is thinking mind expressing his thinking in light, that he is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. He is life, and that life is eternal, and that there is no death. He has neither place nor position in space or time. Boom. Within God's alphabet of light, man is mind. Mind creates and controls the energies of the elements. Mind may rearrange these energies and combine them in accord with its desire. All dimensions of all effects of motion are of the same orderly octave periodicity. Octave periodicity. And here's an example of the cosmic clock of his, the formula of the locked potentials. Periodicities of inhalation and exhalation in all mass are absolute. The universal oneness, this is the law of love. It is the law of the oneness of the universe. All that is one. Individuality is non-existent. Again, that's the non-duality. And again, here's another view of similarly that radiation, that gravitation. Again, gravitation, radiation. The master key to the 7 locked potentials in each octave. This is a chart classifying locked potential points and tones of bound energy according to their octave numbers. Okay. One spiritual substance of divine mind. Light is the life principle of mind. Light is the creating force of the universe. Light is all that is. Light is the living God. God is manifested in light. All is God, and God is all. God is light. Light is all. Love is a realization of the oneness of the universe. Love is the ecstasy of inspired thinking. God's thinking is ecstatic thinking. God is love. When man knows this law in his heart, he will have no limitations. When man knows this law so that its reaction within the soul of man is that of ecstatic, inspired contemplation, he will then begin to know the meaning of love. Unlimited power will then be his. His thinking will then be true thinking. All power is in true thinking. Inspired thinking is thinking in tune with divinity. Thinking in exact pitch with the high octaves of divine thinking. Inner thinking is ecstatic thinking. Outer mind cannot know ecstasy. There is no evil. There is no imperfection. Absolute, infinite perfection. watch our videos on the direct path to learn more about that. With the realization of this law in his heart, he will love and be loved of all men and all created things. All knowledge will come to man when he knows this law in his heart. Inspired man knows the law of love in his heart with the oneness of the universe. This inheritance of all knowing awaits every man to use as and when he desires that knowledge. Omnipresence. There is no other God than mind. All idea of mind is perfect. Imperfection of mind cannot exist. The one substance of mind is light. All matter is light. Mind is light. Mind is all. Integration and disintegration of light energy into the appearance and disappearance of that which man calls matter. Crystallization of light units. Solids of matter. If things are resonating with you and you want to slow them down and pause it, take notes, do that. It's really important to do so. Again, that's the point of this. This is my exegesis, and then you pause, and then you draw out your salience as well. And you can also order the book from the link in the bio below and other Walter Russell publications, and then do your own exegesis. The in-breathing, out-breathing impulses of the living, thinking God mind is an absolute equilibrium throughout the universe. Boom. There are no unconditioned facts of matter in a universe of motion. There are but appearances of facts. Only one infinite creator. The painter with infinite variation. Matter as form in motion is but an ever-changing effect of an unchanging substance. Again, unchanging oceanicness, and then the forms and motions as the ever-changing effects of waves. There is nothing permanent but change, very similar to Heraclitus, Pantare, everything flows, and very juxtaposed with classical Parmenides, that all motion is illusory, and that being the beautiful juxtaposition of the absolute with the infinite creativity of the physical. All form is constantly in transit between appearance and disappearance. The ripples on the water effect upon the substance of water. Motion never ends. No state of motion ever ends. Becoming is the only beginning. Again, the absolute as Parmenides, and then the infinite flow as Heraclitus of that creativity. Nothing is or will be which has not always been. Vapor which disappears from man's sense of vision does not cease to be water. It can again reappear to the vision of man as water. The thinking of mind is within the limitations of the knowledge of mind. Again, the painter has infinite variation. Imperfection or evil is non-existent. Again, absolute infinite perfection. Exploring infinite creativity. Boom. That's what's going on, baby. Out of the soul, the body is again born. The soul is but the record of man's thinking. Creation is just the swing of the cosmic pendulum. All appearances and disappearances are periodic. All things are being. Again, becoming is the only being. Who am I? The very important question that we must ask ourselves, as Ramana Maharshi says, self-inquiry or Atma-Vichara is the best path to that jnana yoga of self-realization. Take that seriously, drill all the way to water, and you will uncover the eternal self. That ocean that is constantly expressing itself as the waves. Again, exploring infinite expression and creativity. I am the empire of I am that am I. Where I am, there God is. God is mind, truth, love, life, light, power. I am the master sculptor. creator of all. I am an expression of the universal passion of creation. I love that one. I am an expression of the universal passion of creation. Mwah! Okay? Manifestation of recollection known as imagination. The genius, the superthinker with imagination who brings beauty to the world is inspired man thinking in light. The greater the imagination, the greater the perception of the reality of universal existence, hence the greater the intelligence. The greater the imagination, the nearer to oneness and the farther from the animal. Boom! Genius is the forerunner of civilization. Genius is the bridge between man and God. Genius knows love and truth in all their fullness. They who attain the ecstasy of genius are ordained messengers of the Universal One. He who tunes his heart to the messages of genius purifies himself. No impurity can there be in his heart, for verily he then is in communion with the Holy One. The pure in heart knows their universality. He who has not ears to hear crucifies genius. The penalty of genius is crucifixion. The reward of genius is immortality. Genius desires no reward. The glory of genius is humility. Genius knows not the taint of arrogance. Man has all knowledge within himself. No exceptions, no mistakes, no error. All right. There is but one dynamic force, gravitation, radiation. This one force appears to divide itself into two, the electricity and the magnetism. Of electricity to integrate into the appearance of form, and magnetism to disintegrate into the disappearance of form. Integrate into appearance of form, disappearance of form. They are both the same force, electricity and magnetism, but they are moving in opposite directions, energy and inertia here in between. And that comes out as this complexity. The one force of the universe is the energy of thinking mind. There is no other energy. Again, this is really as simple as it gets. Realize that you have both that absolute formlessness, and then you have that physical form. And you just have the dynamic interplay of that one force appearing to divide itself into two. There's so many ways to interpret that, and it's just so beautiful to be able to make it so simple. A dimensionless reality, physical universe of form is an illusion. Light does not travel. Light units across octaves. The light unit of the highest octave and the lowest potential eventually becomes a light unit of the lowest octave and highest potential. Light units are omnipresent throughout the universe. And if you want to learn more about the light units, I highly recommend checking out that episode with David Johnson that we did on simulation design on the show, and also the way that he's working on the light unit theory of everything that Terrence Howard is developing as well. It's very much interplayed with the Walter Russell understanding. Inhalation equals integration, exhalation equals derivation. The sun inhales and exhales. Inhalation is regeneration, integration, exhalation is dissolution, disintegration. There is no individuality in this universe of mind. There is but an appearance of individuality. Thinking, light, form. If thinking did not register itself in light and light did not integrate into the forms of idea, the created universe would not be. All energy is light and all idea is light. Electricity is the active attractive force within mind. Magnetism is the reactive repellent force within the substance of mind. Many of these things I chose to write in the bio for you also because they're key highlights. Electromagnetism equals Genero-Radiative, and that equals centripetal centrifugal. Electricity is the inhalation. Magnetism is the exhalation. It's as simple as that. It is as simple as that. Electricity and magnetism exist as separate appearances only when opposed. In non-opposition, they disappear. They become one. Electricity is therefore centripetal. Magnetism is therefore centrifugal. Electricity is the generative force. Magnetism is the radiative force. Again, it was very important for me to not just have the exegesis where I drew out the salience and then wrote it out, but I wanted you to literally see Walter Russell writing these things out. And I thought that that would be really helpful for you and also for your continued investigation into the nature of reality. And the more that you pierce this veil and self-realize, the more you get to the well of honey that's underneath the rock, which is literally eternal bliss peace that is our nature and the coloration of that awareness infinitely across all these creation designs. Because you deserve 24/7 bliss peace and not just 5 minutes of bliss peace every day. All growth is simultaneously integrating and disintegrating. Death is born in the cradle with life. Oh, this is great. I'll be unpacking this more on some coming up videos. Death is a stupid limiting concept. So is birth. They are both anchoring us to ignorance. There is no death. Death is but the beginning of life. Electricity is the vitalizing property of matter. Magnetism is the devitalizing property of matter. Electricity is the father, the male principle of thinking mind. Magnetism is the mother, the female principle of thinking mind. So this is an analogy of the Kogi and Mama Nui Yuan that I'm using here. They're the indigenous of the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta in Colombia. Electricity is male, younger, creative brother. Magnetism is female, the older, wiser sister. So in many ways, that style of that oceanicness, that's sort of the wiser, meanwhile, the younger creativity of the waves just goes out and creates. And that's sort of the balance that we have right now of the planetary ecology and the original living wisdom of the planet that currently has the creative human species on it that is just creating in all of the metropolises and all of the artificial general intelligences and all of the type of stuff that it's doing. Electricity craves separation from magnetism. Magnetism desires an equilibrium of motion and absolute inertia. Electricity desires action. Right? Just like we explained a moment ago. Form is fleeting. Its appearance and disappearance are periodically repetitive throughout eternity. That's the only way to understand the nature of our existence. To use these metaphors that are very explained like I'm five and simple. Again, the eternal ocean and all of the different creative expressions of the waves. These realities. Electricity attracts, magnetism repels. All mass constantly seeks the proper pressure zone for its constantly changing potential. In many ways, the absolute is the formless, dimensionless, like magnetism, and the infinite creativity expression of those waves are like form and dimension, like electricity. So again, that younger brother that's going out and creatively exploring is like the waves, like the electricity. Meanwhile, the older, in many ways, like sister of the absolute oceanicness is like that magnetism. Electricity attracts electricity. Magnetism does nothing but perform its function of repelling. It does not attract itself. Magnetism is that force within the universal mind substance which tends to preserve the oneness of universal uniformity. Magnetism desires a formless and dimensionless universe, just as electricity desires a universe of form and dimension. Magnetism prevents the apparent separation or division of divine mind into parts, as electricity attempts this apparent separation. And that's why we talk a lot about the field and the absolute being that formless, dimensionless, oceanicness field that is all of these different waves of creation designs that are being expressed as these illusory individuals. And that's why people like Alex Gray have the really beautiful visuals, things like the net of being. If you go and look that up, that will help as well with your understanding. The energy of magnetism is the elastic energy of expansion, a straining energy ever pushing toward the inertial line of equalized pressures, which lies between any two masses, while the energy of electricity is ever pulling toward the pulsing heart, the gravitational nucleus of every mass. So magnetism, inertial line of equalized pressures; electricity, gravitational nucleus of every mass. Mind is the one substance. Thinking mind is the one force. The formula of the locked potentials is applied to the law of emanation orbits. The Genero-Active positive non-luminous light units following centripetal orbits to the nucleal center of the next lower potential. All energy is caused by a disturbance in inertia. Everything that is of everything else that is. You'll see Walter repeats many things throughout because he's trying to hammer home some of the core concepts into the reader. And he says them in different ways and decorates them differently. Takes them from different angles but points to the same mountain top from different faces. Each octave is a separate effort for supremacy made by the two opposing forces. It's similar with the densities of consciousness in the law of one. It's a very important analogy to draw us between the 7 densities of consciousness in the law of one, and also very similarly between the octaves of musical notes, just like the coloration on the rainbow. It works very well with Walter Russell as well here. Orderly periodic accumulation of the constant of energy into higher power potentials at the expense of speed. Life is merely an expression of the generative power of centripetal force, to which death is but the degenerative reaction. In the 4th octave, the so-called physical universe begins with but one of its elements known to man, the element hydrogen. And in the law of one, humans appear in the 3rd density, and service to other appears in that 4th density. illusory motion equals matter. Varying states of motion, illusion of different substances, the elements of matter. The 7 tones / octave, just like the law of 1. There are 7 tones to each octave. Again, that lub-dub of the heart, the inhale, the exhale, the prana, the life energy. All direction is curved. All motion is spiral. The law generating matter seeks higher pressure zones. And then here, the law radiating matter seeks lower pressure zones. And so you have this expanding centrifugal radiation that's magnetic, discharging, and you have this contracting centripetal generation that's electric, that's charging. And so that's the charging force that's coming in. And then you have the discharging force that's going out. And that's that rhythmic balanced interchange that's occurring. Rhythmic balanced interchange that's occurring. So one of the most profound things to understand is that rhythmic balanced interchange is a massive key to the nature of existence. And here's another visualization, female in preponderance, where you have the lowering potential, the exhalation, the radiation, and the male in preponderance, the generation, inhalation, increasing potential. This is the electrochemical working chart. All mass is generated and regenerated by a contractive pressure exerted in the direction of its gravitative center. The universal pulse. All motion is oscillatory. The one living being of which all nature is a part breathes the breath of life. And that's why when DJ David Johnson was on our show on simulation design, his tool in the VU is the oscilloscope. All motion is oscillatory. Again, highly recommend watching that show. The electromagnetic pulse beats of a light unit may be 30 trillion to a second. So much to unpack still with those light units and the pulsation and that flux of ratios creating the waves. The energy, the universe is simple. Truth is simple. The more electric potential a man can concentrate, the more work he can perform. Very much like what we were just describing, poles in nonstop flux. Radiation generates and generation radiates. All things can be what they desire to be. Desire and effort to be evolves into the reality of that desire. Boom. And that's why things like the law of attraction and things like The Secret and things like creator consciousness and manifesting are very important, because in the idea of the thinking universe, all is mind, and that is God, and this is light and energy, that it's very important to remember that the unfolding of everything has a lot to do with the way that you think, your desire. What is that? But also simultaneously balanced in a middle way where you don't have craving and attachment at the same time. All right. I started getting a little bit synthetic here as well, where I drew in concepts like the universal wave function. So in many ways, it's like the quantum state of the totality of existence. All energy of motion expresses itself in waves. All direction is therefore curved. There's a lot of analogies to draw between these concepts because they're all interplaying and intertwining. The dimensionless universe of inertia is absolutely stable. One pulls inward from within, the other pushes outward from within. Boom. Just like that. Again, very explain like I'm 5. If man would picture the evolution and devolution of entire solar systems as mere flashings of fireflies in the meadow, he would form a better concept of the instability of solidity. That's right. Great analogy. The fireflies in the meadow, just like the entire solar systems. And just like the waves on the ocean. And again, the explain like I'm 5 is what I'm trying to highlight here. A lot of these breakdowns are very like here mathematical relations, right? And so if you want to, you can pause and check these out yourself, or again, just buy the book and the link yourself and look them up to dive into them. Universal white light of inertia, simulation in motion. Again, that universal white light that is refracting. Such a core perennial spiritual wisdom. Opposing substances can be induced to attract each other by forcing a union under high pressure or by using a catalyst as a mediator. And that's why in the third density in the law of one, we have the evolutionary catalyst for humans. Every state of motion has not only its own pressure zone, but its own plane. There is no death, man cannot die, nor can motion end. Boom. Simple. As light units separate one from another, they discharge each other. Consciousness whirlpools in oceanic infinity. All effects of motion are whirlwinds. Whirlpool. That's why I put this also in the bio. It's such a critical thought. And here's that, that's tornado principle here. It's a very important one with those whirlpools and whirlwinds and vortexes, just like what was being explained earlier. The periodicity of attraction, the periodicity of repulsion. Again, key words here, periodicity. It's periodic. A rhythmic balanced interchange, ratios in flux. The universal constant of energy is expressed by mass in motion. Energy expressed by mass in motion. There is a true position for every potential. Again, all vortices turn from west to east, and their apses point to north. As an apex, plural. Apices. Again, many of these are the cubes of motion, important if you want to look in more depth, to actually purchase yourself and go look at them and see what sticks out for you as your exegesis. Inertia overcomes motion. The creating universe is a reflection of its concept in inertia. Okay, again, ratios of poles in flux equals energy. Again, a rhythmic balanced interchange. Universal mathematics are ratios of opposite expressions of the one force. Again, let's listen carefully. Universal mathematics are ratios of opposite expressions of the one force. Again, the universal math is simply put the one force in ratios of opposite expression. It's that simple. The one into poles that has different ratios of flux, rhythmic, balanced, interchange appearing as these waves. The one ocean appearing as these waves in a polarities in ratios being expressed. Ratios in flux is universal. Again, universal mathematics. All dimensions are pressure dimensions. All dimensions simultaneously expand and contract in opposite directions of the same ratio. Fourth pressure zone, third pressure zone, second pressure zone, and first pressure zone. The formula of the lock potentials in universal ratios. Tones vary in ratios which are absolute and universal. Okay. There's more of these visualizations. Universe equals energy in motion. The universal wave function. Opposing electromagnetic cones of energy. Another great way to put it. Distance dimensions of energy of tones within a wave. Another great visualization. The charge and discharge here. Highly recommend supporting the University of Science and Philosophy and Walter Russell. Buy the book. Check it out. Draw out your own salient points from it. Nature's method of storing energy and mass. You have the integration and the disintegration and the illusory diversity and oneness that we experience. To know the wave is to know the secret of creation. Boom. Love that. The wave is nature's method of transferring the dimensionless concept of form in inertia to dimensional form in mass in motion by an impact of the energy of the concept against the inertial plane. To know the wave is to know the secret of creation. And that's why the universal wave function, right, is so critical. And to be able to sort of understand what the quantum state of all that is would be, how to take and represent that, and how to understand it also at these most expressions of the one oceanicness with the two poles in a rhythmic balanced interchange as waves. Again, to know the wave is to know the secret of creation, not only at a level of physics, but at a level of metaphor and spirituality with the ocean at the same time. It's fascinating. And here's another great way to put it. The wave equals two opposed units. Such a simple way to put it. All motion appears in mass and disappears in plane. The wave is a spiral. So good. A wave is not a single unit. It is a series of two opposed units. A wave is mass in opposition. And here we have the inertial line at the top and the inertial line at the bottom. This is the pressure zone diagram, all mass to rotate and to revolve in spiral orbits. And here's a good way to sort of visualize it. As you have this wave, you have this first pressure zone that's created here, and then you have the second pressure zone, and the third and fourth. You have these pressure zones that are occurring. And this is where you have these laws, like contracting mass seeks higher pressure zones, and you have expanding mass seeks lower pressure zones. And so you see that the universal reproductive octave constant That's a really good one. The universal reproductive octave constant. Waves equals energy in motion. I love that. So simple. Waves equals energy in motion. Again, very similar to that metaphor of the ocean and the waves, of the absolute and its infinite creative expression. The evolution of mass from plane to sphere and its diffusion back to plane are by the way of the cone. And another great way to say it, energy equals polar ratios in flux. Energy expresses itself by an apparent division of its force into equal opposites of more and less. Again, those polar ratios in flux. The one expressing itself as these polar ratios in flux, creating these waves of creation designs and individuals immersed in them, experiencing them, that eternal coloration of awareness. Again, we're going to make a separate video on this, but ego and time are the two heaviest anchors holding people back from self-realization. What is the I without time? It's fucking infinite. Time is the measure of universal repetitiveness. All phenomena of nature are repetitive. Time is the interval between the sequences of events. Time belongs essentially to motion and is not an attribute of substance. Displacement and replacement are universally simultaneous. I love that one. And another great way to put it, the universal seesaw. Right? That pendulum seesaw. Simultaneity equals synthesis equals Joseph and the Code of Many Colors. Simultaneity is essential to the maintenance of an equilibrium. In motion, force has the illusion of existence. You can see I'm drawing many complex concepts into the same arena to try and create a harmonization between the perennial spiritual traditions as well as the cutting edge sciences. A universe of varying pressures. Any force of the universe of dimension is an opposing pressure force. Light is the universal language. The colors of light are the letters of the alphabet, so simply put. Combinations of the letters of light are the words of the language of light. All effects of motion absorb light and give forth light. All light is a complexity of all colors. So good. Mind creates that which mind thinks. Energy is conceived in inertia, stored in mass, and recorded in plane. The evolution of mass from plane to sphere. Again, that appearance and disappearance. Mass is generated into the appearance of form by the attraction of gravitation and is radiated into the disappearance of form by the repulsion of radiation. The generation of mass. Generation decelerates rotation. And the degeneration of mass, degeneration accelerates rotation. Evolution of mass, electricity evolves mass into the form of a true sphere and magnetism devolves it into plane. The process is orderly and periodic. Again, so simple. Both forces meet in reproductive union. Spiral waves are formed and all spiral motion is born. I love it. Forces meet in reproductive union. Boom. The two poles are constantly meeting in reproductive union. One. Each of the opposing forces conquers the other by simulating the desire of the other. All motion characterized by oscillation. All masses rotate on their axes and revolve around their gravitative centers. Again, these graphics are super duper helpful explaining acceleration and deceleration of rotation. So on one side, you have the attractive pull of gravitation that's coming in. And on the other side, you have this repellent thrust of radiation going out. So the gravitative pull and the radiative push. The electropositive force of attraction pulls inward from within. The electronegative force of repulsion pushes outward from within. The opposing forces of gravitation and radiation. So that, simply put. The greater the radioactivity, the greater the power of mass to give out its heat. The cosmic clock winds itself towards solidity into the appearance of form and unwinds itself toward nebulosity into the disappearance of form. The process is orderly and periodic. Again, just the ocean and the waves, guys. It's that simple. Inhalations and exhalations, heartbeats. I mean, how simple is it? All the codes are right under our nose. Okay. And then this is very beautiful. It reminds me a lot of the Lie groups in the E8 lattice. Signs of crystallography. Crystallization chart. The basic principle of crystallization. In accord with the formula of locked potentials. Okay. The dimensionless universe knows neither plane nor mass. The universe of dimension knows infinite variety of both plane and mass. There you go. Again, just so simply put. I love it. All mass is an aggregation of light units. Here's an explanation of ionization. Again, you have the ionization increasing and the ionization decreasing. That north and south, that male-female, negative-positive, centrifugal force, centripetal force. Ionization is the process of disintegration. All effects of motion obey the orderliness of the formula of the locked potentials. Ionization is a disintegration effect of motion, and the ratios of disintegration are in the direct of the universal as those of integration are in the inverse. This was interesting. Valence equals tonal relations. So the universal wave function described in valence. This was interesting. The term valence is a standard unit of tonal relations. So valence can be thought of here as ratios in flux, which equals energy. So valence describes energy. Relative willingness or unwillingness to unite with each other. It's fascinating. So all of those the one in harmonic flux, so rhythmic balanced interchange into these different waves, is in a sense valence, is energy. It can be described that way. All right, we're coming to a close here, the conclusion. The purpose of these writings is to illumine the road leading to eternal life by knowledge of the journey through illusion and back again to reality, taken by man in his repeated adventures in time, space, and motion. In order to illumine the way, it is first necessary to trace the simulations, reflections, and illusions of the apparently many substances, forms, and things back to their base in the reality of the one thing. The created universe is but an illusion of the forms of ideas thought out by mind. Mind is the only real thing in the universe, and mind is all that is. Thinking mind evolves ideas and registers them in form through motion. I wrote here, the Absolute's dream. All these different creation designs and explorations. That which we call self is but the changing form of idea thought out by the unchanging formless one. Beautiful. Unchanging ocean, and then all of the ideas of waves. When man learns that God is mind, that mind is the one living, pulsing, thinking force, and that he is that force, then man will have arrived at another stage in his evolution. He is but a simulation of the idea of himself being thought out in eternity by himself. Then he will know the ecstasy of inner thinking. I love Walter Russell. It's so good. Okay. There is no death, no darkness, only life in the universe of light. Life, light, all that is. God is that. Just so long as man looks for the God force outside of nature and outside of himself, just so long as he bows in fear to the personal deity of his early inheritance, he will be the slave of his own imaginings. Boom. To know that the universal force is mind, and that man and all else that is mind, is to inspire man with the ecstasy of inner thinking. I love it. Jesus knew the universal language of light in all its fullness. He knew the ecstasy of inner thinking as no man has ever known it. Jesus knew the universality of all things, the oneness of all things. He gave that knowledge to the then dull-witted, brutal, lustful, loveless world in his much-needed message of brotherly love. He lived again in John and Paul and Plotinus and all those messengers who knew the light of universal thinking. Jesus gave to man the one great message of all time. He taught the universality of all things in the white light of the universal one of impartial love, from whose rulings there is no appeal, but only a few could faintly understand. Spirit of truth will again come to guide you into all truth. And that's the cyclic style of the cosmology of the Buddhas and the Jesuses and the Lao Tzus and the Confuciuses and all of the Hermeses and all of these people that have come to express the love, light, truth over and over again eternally to us, to awaken us, to pierce the veil and self-realize. Everything that is must be of everything else that is. No two of anything. All things are universal. One. And here's another great visual. You have that one, and you have the creating universe appears from the one and disappears into the one. The oceanicness expressed as waves. The eternal creative waves of the one oceanicness. When he acquires the stability of perfect balance in his thinking, he will be ready for the light, ecstasy of universal thinking, all presence in unity with the one. And again, a really good visualization here. Gravitation and radiation. Gravitation, the attraction of gravitation pulls inward toward high pressures from low pressures. In radiation, the repulsion of radiation pushes outward toward low pressures from high pressures within. And again, I kind of wrote this. It's cute. The absolute's heartbeat. Universe, radiation, the Ouroboros. All thinking is creating that which it is thinking. No idea of mind has place or position in time or space. All idea is universal. All mass is degenerated by its own radiation. All mass is generated by accumulation of the universal constant of energy into higher potential. That which is generated must be radiated. All opposite effects of motion are simultaneous in their expression. No state of motion ever began or ever ended. All mass is both electric and magnetic. All mass simultaneously expresses both opposites of all effects of motion. Again, we've been doing many of these in the direct path videos that you can check out, but it's an agentless, absolute, infinitely expressing itself. Again, an agentless, attributeless, absolute, infinitely expressing itself. So the ocean, the agentless, attributeless ocean, infinitely expresses itself creatively as waves, aka creation designs, physicalism, humans, awareness being colored eternally. All electromagnetic mass forms into systems of units which revolve in spiral orbits both centripetally toward and centrifugally away from nucleal centers. So well said. Electricity attracts, magnetism repels. All opposite effects of motion are simultaneous. Another critical one. And the greater the radioactivity, the greater the power of mass to give out its heat. And then there are some revisions and changes that you'll see at the back. And we'll just briefly say that The Secret of Working Knowingly with God is another booklet that helps. The universe itself is all light. Optics is the true science of electricity. And then here's the University of Science and Philosophy, the headquarters. And the Sculpture Gardens, the works of Walter and Lau Russell. Beautiful. And the University of Science and Philosophy right there. And other books by Walter Russell. Go and check them out. The link's in the bio below. The Secret of Light, A New Concept of the Universe, The Message of the Divine Iliad, The Book of Early Whisperings. And there's many, many other ones there for you to check out. And boom. That's a wrap, folks. The Universal One. Incredible. All right. Well, I am so pumped that we got to do this together. I'm glad that we got to unpack this. Again, I'm super grateful to Andy Bittner for making the introduction to Walter Russell's work. It's been extremely important for my synthesis and very important for very grateful for DJ David Johnson and his continued influence as well on me with this type of work. So again, really dive into this in depth. It's a massive synthesis of metaphysics and idealism and consciousness and that absolute oceanicness with the way that it expresses itself creatively as these waves, as these physical creation designs of illusory individuation, and the science of the electromagnetism of the Genero-Radiative forces, centrifugal and centripetal, the simultaneity of those infinitely expressing itself. And to understand that rhythmic balanced interchange there is critical. Those ratios in flux, that valence, that energy in motion, that those waves of the ocean are what this is. It's what it's been. It's what it will continue doing forever and ever, eternity. So it's beautiful. He's eloquent. Walter Russell does a great job, and he's very much, DJ was telling me last time we were hanging on New Year's Eve that he hung out with Tesla and Mark Twain, and that the sort of ideas are obviously very synergistic with them as well. And so to, in a sense, uncover Walter Russell is a very important part of the journey in piercing the veil and self-realizing, and also synthesizing the consciousness metaphysics with the way that it expresses itself as these waves of science that we investigate. So I love you very much. Thank you for tuning in. Thanks for checking this out. Check out the links in the bio below, again, to the University of Science and Philosophy, and also the link to all of Walter Russell's books is down there. Go and buy the Universal One. Draw out the salience yourself with your own exegesis. Go and re-listen to this and pause several points and take notes as you need as well. And that's all. Let me know how you feel in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And subscribe if you haven't to the channel. Like the video, share the video with those that need to hear this as well. Let's encourage more people to pierce the veil and self-realize. And I love you. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you on many more videos like this soon, where we do other critical reviews, and we're going to iron out the best optimal strategies video and audio wise in doing so. So thank you, and that's all. Much love. Peace.